All right, take two. Hopefully, I don't know if people were on with us just previously, but when I invited Evie in, I can only see myself. And so we didn't know if the viewers could see us both or not. Here is Evie again. I'm going to wait for her to ask to join. And then once she does, I will let her in. It looks like she has. Oh, it says that you're unable to join, Evie. Let me try to accept you again. Okay, go live. Okay. There, yay! We got it today. That was so you could see me just fine and I just couldn't see you. That is so weird.
It's weird.
This is why we came on a few minutes early, because we knew there could potentially be some technical issues, because we have had quite a few technical issues. Well, I am really excited to be here today again with you, Evie. I think that what we're talking about today is such an essential part for women, and I think that is not often actually talked about. It's interesting, even as a sex therapist. So today we're talking about the perimenopausal phase of the menstrual cycle. And even as a sex therapist, like, this wasn't touched on at all in my training.
Wow.
Yeah. And yet it's such an essential part of like what happens for women. So if you haven't seen Evie and I before, we actually did a 4-part series on the menstrual cycle itself. And so all of those are already on both of our pages in the lives. I think they were like in September or October last year. And so if you go back on our pages, you should be able to find that. But if there is anyone that wants us to like tag them or send them those particular ones because you want to go through the different parts of the menstrual cycle, we're happy to do that as well. And then what we are doing is this week we are doing perimenopause, and then next week we're actually going to talk about menopause. Ooh, menopause, something you're not supposed to talk about again too. So we are really excited to bring that. But to start, what I thought is, I know some of you have met us before, some of you have not, is that we would introduce ourselves again, talk a little bit about what we do and our Enneagram type, and then I'll let Evie take it away and talk a little bit about the perimenopausal cycle. I will start and then I will hand it off to Evie. My name is Lindsay Frazier. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, as well as a certified sex therapist and an IA accredited professional. I have a private practice in South Minneapolis where I specialize in relationships and sexuality, utilizing the Enneagram. Why don't you go? Oh, my type. I always forget to do this. I am an Enneagram type 9 with a wing of 1, and I am social dominant with the sexual instinct in the repressed position. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, Evie, and then take it away with the perimenopause phase.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Evie. I'm at the Type Guide here on Instagram, and I am a certified Enneagram coach who specializes in the menstrual cycles. I am a 1 wing 2, and I am a sexual dominant with I'm blind self-preservation. And yeah, I work with clients all over the world, helping people understand how they can live more in tune with their body, their menstrual cycle, and their Enneagram type. But thank you so much for having me back, Lindsay. It's so great. We had such a wonderful time, digging into the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle back in September or October, as you just mentioned. And it feels great to be, as you just said, digging into the kind of taboo or unspoken perimenopause and menopause phases of our lives, our existence. So I feel really excited for this conversation today. I think it's really important to kind of first understand what we're talking about when we're throwing perimenopause about. Well, what is that it is different from the menopause, and yet they are intrinsically linked. And so the menopause is actually the phase that greets us as we move out of our fertile years, as people living in female bodies, but we're not quite yet into the menopause, which would be kind of the final stage of our reproductive years. So if we think about our cycle from menarche, from our first period, all the way through to our last, those are our fertile years, and then we move into the perimenopause, and then finally the menopause. And we see perimenopausal years starting from as early as 35, although of course people can go into the menopause early, but it's usually between 40 and 50 that we start to see perimenopause kind of making an entrance into our lives. Does that feel like a good jumping off point for today, Lindsay, to you?
Yeah, and I think you know, as a sex therapist and in my practice, like I do see a lot sort of within that like later 30s to early 50s as sort of the starts, right? And the interesting thing is like every single woman is really unique around this. Like you said, like some people could go through it at 35, and there's some people in their mid 50s that still get periods and are still in perimenopause. And so I think it can last for such a long time. The thing that I often see kind of happen first is some of the like mood swings with the cycle. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And I think, it's such a full-bodied experience, just like the menstrual cycle. Yeah, it really is as physical as it is emotional. And it's, what can we kind of notice first? For some people, it will be maybe mood, anxiety, brain fog. Even within perimenopause, we can see issues with memory, working memory there. But there's also the physical symptoms. So the hot flashes, the night sweats, vaginal dryness is a huge indicator. And then also the longer cycles, so a greater amount of time between each period is also a key indicator that your body might be shifting into this perimenopausal state. And so those are all really kind of key indicators to look out for. Now, not everybody will experience everything. Lindsay, you just said so wonderfully there that the experience of the menstrual cycle, of perimenopause, is so unique to the individual. And that's why I find, teaching the Enneagram alongside these key life stages, whether it be trying for a baby in your fertile years, whether it be understanding what's going on with your body during the menopause, it's because we are all so unique. There's so much specificity to what's going on for us on an individual level. And that's why I think today's such an important conversation, because we are barely scratching the surface for what we should be doing for ourselves during the menstrual cycle. We're nowhere near the level of conversation with menopause and perimenopause. And I think if you take anything away from this conversation, my hope and my heart would be that you allow the experience to be as individual as you are. Do not try and shoehorn or try and box yourself into an experience that just isn't true for you. Allow your experience to be what it is, and celebrate it for that. Just like the fertile years of the menstrual cycle, there are going to be peaks and troughs. Today we are going to touch on some of those troughs, some of those maybe harder elements, but gosh, there are tons and tons of peaks as well. We actually see women beginning to step into their confidence in a new and maybe more powerful way during the perimenopause and into menopause, especially from conversations I've had with friends and family members who are into that phase now. It feels very exciting to me. This confidence boost that, really meets us there as we start to transition into the perimenopause and then finally through into the menopause. And so that feels really exciting. And so yes, the hot flashes and the night sweats and the vaginal dryness don't sound fun. I don't think they are fun. But let's hold on to some of those peaks, some of the increased confidence, increased power. Freedom is often a word that is associated with the perimenopause and the menopause. So let's not. I don't want to be too type 1 and lose all the positives there. I don't know how you kind of relate to it, Lindsay, as you yeah, maybe have grown up with that messaging of perimenopause and menopause being such a taboo and really ignored by society. How does that sit with you?
I mean, I think it's interesting because I'm 45, so I'm right at this stage, and right now I really don't have a whole lot of the symptoms or the things that would indicate that perimenopause is happening. But I think one of the things that happens when you are around this age is like you are bombarded. It was really interesting to me when I entered my later 30s. All of a sudden, all the advertising around this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. And I'm like, is it happening? And I don't know that it's happening. You know, was sort of the experience that I had. But one of the interesting things that had been happening for me, probably, well, actually, it would have been like in the summertime, is I had started to have more painful periods. And the reason I'm bringing this up is I ended up, you know, and I was having some digestive issues. And so because, you know, in Western medicine, I was like, well, you know, it could be all perimenopausal related, or it could be separate related. And like, am I going to go to a digestive doctor and an OBGYN and maybe this other type of doctor? I said, or in my head, I thought, well, what if I tried acupuncture, right? To see if this might be the avenue to kind of go. And actually, I've had huge success with that. I don't have painful periods. I've had, like, the last 2 months have been the best periods I've ever had in my life. But they're still consistent. They still come when they're supposed to, and like clockwork and all of these types of things. But what was interesting when I met with this acupuncturist, which I think is good for us to say, is that it is common for people to have all the symptoms that you mentioned, but it isn't necessarily normal. And I think that we get these messages that, and the acupuncturist said, like, you know, if you're really taking care of your body and the hormones in the things that you should be doing, like, a lot of us can just kind of like, it's just one day your period stops. But because of like Western medicine having more, and again, I mean, I use both, and I would use Eastern and Western medicine in approaches to my health, but it's Western medicine's approaches to deal with, you know, taking care of the symptoms once they happen versus preventing the symptoms from happening, which is what the acupuncturist or Eastern medicine approach will take. And so I think the reason I'm bringing this up is that it's really good because there isn't a lot of like research or study or anything around this. Like, there are a lot of things that exist, so this doesn't have to be all those things we're so afraid of. There is hormone replacement therapy, there is acupuncture, there is changing your nutrition. And like, one thing I have noticed, and this could be, I'm extremely sensitive to alcohol, and so I significantly have reduced how much alcohol I drink, and I basically don't drink at all, or when it's like a special holiday, because even the glass of wine, which is very common in the 40s and 50s to start to have high sensitivity to alcohol when I never did before. And so my guess is that's probably one of my symptoms that is coming. But like, also like how good it feels, like just like how much better you sleep and how good it feels, like not have that be something that I do anymore.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, Lindsay, that kind of really paints the perfect picture almost of, yeah, there are all these symptoms that can happen, and they are primarily very negative, but actually they don't have to happen. And often they can be brought on by the level of stress we're experiencing, by not taking care of our bodies, by not listening to our bodies. And I think especially as women, especially as people that maybe try and do all and be all to everyone because we were told that we could, we do see these symptoms, but actually they are not conditional. You can absolutely go through the perimenopause and the menopause and it just be wonderful and it just be fantastic. There doesn't have to be this kind of negative symptom version of those events, and so that sometimes might happen, you know, if we experience high levels of stress, if we for whatever reason are not able to take care of our body, if we're not able to move our body, if we're not able to nourish our body, if we're not able to rest our body. But also, if you are having some of those symptoms, let that be an indication that, hey, maybe you need to take better care of yourself. Or, as I find myself saying to clients a lot over the festive period, take exquisite care of yourself. You know, nobody else is going to. It's really important that we find a way to do that. And so I think, Lindsay, that is, yeah, just so exciting for us to consider, exciting for me to consider. I'm 28, and so I'm probably, yeah, that little bit further away from perimenopause, although we don't know what my experience will be. And actually, yeah, if I could begin to remove some of these kind of what feels like conditional issues that come with this time frame, gosh, it becomes much more exciting, it becomes much more enjoyable. I actually heard he's quite a famous GP here in the UK. He has quite a big TikTok following. But he likened them, and I really like a lot of his stuff, but he likened the menopause recently to a disease that, it's just bad. We should think of it and treat it as a disease. And that's why I think, yeah, the kind of intersection of Eastern and Western medicine, I love my acupuncturist, I love my herbalist, I love my traditional Chinese medicine doctor. If you're hearing things that maybe just don't sit right with you, because, women have been having menopauses have been going through the menopause for a very long time now. So potentially is not a disease. Make the change. Find a professional that can support your version of, yeah, the life experience you want to experience. Don't settle. Again, would be something that's really key for the perimenopause. But yeah, let's maybe think about where this kind of the role of the perimenopause in the Enneagram. Okay, and so I think it's really key to remember that just before we get our initial period, our menarche, we might have a couple of months, 6 months, maybe a year, maybe 18 months of a bit of a transition, and we're moving from childhood and into adolescence. And we want to think of, yeah, the perimenopause as kind of a similar time. There is a transition going on, a big change going on, and that can feel really overwhelming. If we are experiencing some of those more difficult symptoms, if we maybe haven't ever been prepared for this change, that can feel like a big shift is going on. And so actually a conversation that I've had a lot with clients who, are doing Enneagram work in this period of time is that they feel that maybe they mistyped when they were younger, or maybe they were once a 3 but now they're definitely a 6, or maybe they were once a 3 and now they're definitely a 9. And so what I would say, is you are still your dominant type, your main type. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater there. But there's a potential that you are going to gain this kind of wider perspective on life throughout this time. And we always want to bring balance in the Enneagram. So yeah, type 1 is most dominant for me, but I do have aspects of the other 8 types within me. And so we just want to think about always bringing balance to that. Would you agree with that, Lindsay?
I mean, I completely agree with that. And I think one of the things that I see too is because, like you said, with the hormones, like our hormones are just like up and down as much as they are during like puberty, right before we get our first periods. And I think that there's less tolerance in some ways to deal with things that you may have once been okay with dealing with. So like even as like, and I think that you're right, like women come into their power into their 40s and their 50s, right? And yet society tries to squash them, which is like a whole other conversation. But I think is like, you may be more easily able to step into, like for me, for instance, as a 9, like being more assertive. Like maybe I'm not gonna be okay with things that once I could just tolerate, and in all likelihood there's a combination of things happening, right? It's your self-growth, it's better awareness of yourself, it's knowing for me that having presence is essential, but also those hormones are like, hey, I'm more irritable. I'm not going to deal with this, which, I mean, in some ways, what a gift, right? Because like what I say with people around, like, even if you have like a PMS or premenstrual, stress, or like even when you're having some more of those hormones, the things that you feel are true. Your hormones just amplify them. So there is information there to pay attention to. And so for a lot of women, the tolerance levels go down and we're not really willing to deal with the crap, is what I will say anymore. We're kind of done. A lot of them are just done being the good girl or the people-pleasing woman that a lot of us, I'm sure, I know in the United States society are encouraged to be, and I'm sure it's true in the UK culture as well. And so I think that it's like you said, our type doesn't change. You know, it's much as, you know, I'm not sure whether I believe whether you're born with it or not, but I do believe that it's formed within the first 5 years, just like any other personality traits that we have. And so it doesn't change when you're in your 40s. It's just, it may look different because you're coming into yourself and you're coming into your power.
Totally. And what a gift, you know. And it's like I say about the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle. Yes, there are some challenges, or there are some opportunities, and it absolutely depends on how you're, you know, looking at those moments, how you're choosing to engage with them. And, you know, again, here I would see the perimenopause as so many opportunities, you know, with that tolerance being lower, with maybe, you know, our emotional state being potentially more heightened. Wow, there's potentially some freedom there for, you know, withdrawing stance types to maybe speak up a little bit more, or for compliance stance types to maybe say, no, I can't take on any more right now. No, you'll have to ask somebody else. And that just feels really exciting to me. And yeah, hopefully if you're watching, it does for you as well. But let's take a look just specifically at a little bit of stance work then. So if we're thinking about the assertive stance or the aggressive stance, so that's 3s, 7s, and 8s, I do feel that this can be, yeah, a little bit of an extreme time for feeling extra vulnerable, okay? Because we don't have as much access to, you know, being in control, you know, we don't have as much access to feeling as polished and, you know, showing up to work or whatever our work is, whether we're paid for it or not, in the same way, because there are some shifts and some changes happening that we perhaps were not expecting. And so, you know, I do feel like the assertive stance types are, you know, king and queens of vamping, and you know, we kind of lose the ability to vamp as much during this time. We don't have as much reserves, and that can really catch assertive or aggressive stance numbers, you know, off guard. And I think there is a vulnerability there that can come through. Now, that again can be a really powerful thing for those types who sometimes need a little bit more support in getting into that vulnerable state. The world is kind of supercharging that moment there for you, and so there's a little bit of an opportunity to step into it, uncomfortable though it may be. There is some definite growth there for you if you want it, if you're up for it. Compliance stance, you know, I think.
Okay, can I stop you a second for like the assertive stance? One of the things before we go to the compliance stance. So one of the things that we think might be a potential for people that are in the assertive stance is that actually during perimenopause, they may need testosterone more than they need estrogen for hormone replacement therapy. And I just wanted to mention that because there have been some people that just knowing that, like, if you're going to go to a Western medical doctor, this is why I wanted to just stop there for a second, is that you might actually need testosterone versus estrogen, and really being able to advocate and assert and ask those questions, because especially the 8s that I have had, and even friends that I have had that are 8s that have gone through menopause and the perimenopausal phase, they needed testosterone to feel better more than the estrogen. So just a little side note on that one. But let's go into the compliance stance now.
That is awesome. That's an awesome piece of information. But yes, compliance stance. I think we have this kind of increasing of needs. Okay, there's a significant increase of needs when we're in the compliance stance and we're moving into perimenopause, and things can be very symptom heavy. And so this feeling of overwhelm, this feeling of, you know, like you can't catch your breath, like the waves are just going to carry you out to sea, is really, you know, something that we see a lot with our 1s, 2s, and 6s, that there just now isn't enough time, there's not enough energy, and we're just out here, you know, looking for, you know, a lifeline. And again, that is an opportunity, 1s, 2s, and 6s. And I'm talking to myself here, of course, but to be your own lifeline, to put some things in place to really take care of yourself and nurture yourself. And whilst you're giving lots out to other people, how could you actually turn that inward and give to yourself? I think is absolutely huge there. And then withdrawing stance, this time can feel really oppressive. You know, you kind of are coming to the end of the menstrual cycle, which, you know, 4s, 5s and 9s can find quite affronting anyway, because there's so much change involved, and things are constantly moving. And then we move into, you know, the perimenopause, and these symptoms are changing again, and they now maybe don't even have the rhyme and reason of the 4 stages that you perhaps got on board with for the last 20, 25 years, 15 years, depending on the length of your fertile years. And so that can feel, yeah, like you're just not ever truly at home in your body. There can be maybe even a sense of loss there for our withdrawing stance types. And so, you know, for the withdrawing stance, when we're kind of dealing with all these changes happening at once, it's how do you center yourselves in and amongst that? How do you find a way to center yourself, maybe with acupuncture, maybe with daily practices, maybe with therapy, maybe with hormone replacement therapy, you know, whatever it is. How do you kind of provide a safe container to experience the perimenopause and then into the menopause? Although I will say with withdrawing stance, once they move into the menopause, you know, they're the quickest to kind of get on board with it and be okay with it. And so that's very exciting for the withdrawing stance, I think. But yeah, I think that when we, you know, stance work for me is just the most exciting and important work we can do when we're talking broadly within the Enneagram. And actually, yeah, knowing and being prepared for maybe this feeling of overwhelm, or maybe this you know, pushing into vulnerability, or maybe this kind of inward oppression that we're experiencing, can be really helpful and dictate how we take care of ourselves during this 5 to 10 year period of perimenopause.
I'll say one of the interesting things that I read more recently is that only 4% of women going through this phase actually seek any sort of medical help. Yeah. And I think, to me, that was really eye-opening, because you don't have to suffer. There are Eastern and Western medicine models that can help this process go more efficiently. And I think, I was asking myself when I read that stat, like, why is that? And I think it's because we don't talk about it. Like, it was really interesting. Like, I, you know, asked my mom, because nobody ever told me, like, when she went through menopause or when my grandmother went through menopause. And, you know, my mother had a hysterectomy, as well as my sister, because they both had endometriosis, like, in the early 40s. And she said, well, I think it, you know, because I had the hysterectomy, but I think it was in my mid 50s. And then she goes, but your aunt, who's 50, she's 9 years older than me, so she's 54, she still gets regular periods. I was like, oh, but like, it was so interesting to me, because it's like, we don't talk about this, so women don't know, or they're afraid to, like, ask their doctors or get the things that are necessary. And so, like, when we had done the, you know, the menstrual cycle, I was like, I think we need to talk about this too, because so many people are not. And actually, what's been wonderful is I'm seeing more and more within the last year or two. So I think it's really great that that's happening. But, like, you don't have to suffer either.
Yeah, totally. It goes back to what we were kind of talking about at the top of it, that it doesn't have to be just bad. There can be just peaks. You know, I think as much as possible, you deserve to take exquisite care of yourself. And yes, sometimes there are things in the way, there are blockers in the way to, you know, experiencing that support and that help. But as much as possible, fight for it. You know, advocate for yourself. Ask people, gather information, learn about things from the people closest to you, you know, people in your family, friends that are close to you. And I think really start digging into where the shame might be coming from, you know, and how we can begin to unpick that on an individual level, but then also, you know, on a local, on a global level, because we have been taught that shame. You know, that is, we were not born with it. And so how do we really look that, you know, dead in the eye and say, I'm actually not gonna I'm not going to live like this. I'm not going to live under that shame. I'm not going to live in this pain. And you know, this kind of goes back to the other 4 conversations we were having as well. But at any point, you don't have to suffer. At any point. And I think when suffering is so inbuilt into the female experience, and I want to point out that, you know, as a white woman, that is, you know, significantly decreased. We have to, you know, absolutely be thinking about everybody, every female experience. But when suffering is inbuilt in, it's just so normalized. And yeah, Lindsay, like you were saying, period pain, period discomfort, menstrual pain is really common, but it's not normal. And so if you are experiencing anything, work out who you can talk to. And if you want support with that, you know, my DMs, I'm not going to speak for Lindsay, but she's a very good person. I'm sure her DMs might be open as well. Or comment if you're feeling brave and you want to dig into that shame. Comment and you know, ask. Let's support each other. We're not going to get anywhere by ourselves, and this does affect half of us. So really key to remember. Let's take a little look at the role this can play in relationship dynamics. And I would love to talk about how the libido can be affected, because I think, again, this is something that's just not spoken about at all, and you know, is kind of taboo on top of taboo. And so really important to note that the libido can be massively impacted during this time. It can be significantly impacted, and that's something to be really aware of and not to feel any shame about, you know, which is easier said than done, of course, but I do think clear and open communication is absolutely the way forward. And that really starts, you know, with self, with kind of understanding and noticing that in yourself, so that you can then communicate that to your partners. And I think that's really where kind of, having, I want to phrase this in the right way, but owning your sexuality as yours, if you have been in a long-term relationship at this point in life for a significant amount of time, remembering that your sexual identity is yours, and to kind of hold that boundary so that you can have that conversation with yourself before having it with anybody else. Does that track for you, Lindsay, in how I'm describing that in terms of client work?
Yeah. There's kind of 2 things that will happen around libido during the perimenopause. You might see it amp up in sexual desire, having more desire, more want for sexual intimacy and connection. Again, you know, this could be a little bit of the play of testosterone. We don't know fully. Or it can go the opposite way, where you have a decline in sexual desire, or it's sort of like your hormones aren't guiding the move through, and like, so it may take more work, it may take more emotional connection, you may not get lubricated as quickly, you might start to have some physical pain as the vaginal walls are starting to thin, which is really common for a lot of women to start to experience that, and then to have significantly more of that even after menopause happens. And this is where I think, again, it's just so essential and so important to continue to have the conversations around sexuality, because it can be like, if you're not talking about it with your male or female partner, depending on who you're with, but especially your male counterparts that don't really have the same body parts, they may not think that you love them as much, or that you don't desire them, or you don't feel like they're sexy anymore, or all of these types of things, because they don't understand the role of how the hormones can shift sort of this, or like all of a sudden, like, whoa, like you want to have sex all the time, like where did this come from, like you've never been like this, you know. And I think it's what's interesting to me, like one of the things that Sam and I have noticed as well is, like, just in general, people that are self-preservation dominant, as they get a little bit older and they have less context in their lives, you might see it will look like desire's peaking up, but it's actually not desire peaking up. It's just I don't have as many things stopping me from wanting to have sex. So it's just a very interesting thing. And so, or it can be the other way sometimes for self-preservation too. Like, I don't feel good in my body hurts all the time. And so there's more context. And so I think like one of the things that I will always tell my couples is like, you probably shouldn't be having sex if you're not talking about it. And it's so essential at this point in time, because sexual behaviors that may have worked before may not work anymore. You may have to find different things. You may not be able to have intercourse depending on how painful sex becomes or how much of that thinning. But if you have the communication and you can explain to your partner like the types of erotic touch that you want, which is more oral and manual stimulation sexual behaviors, then you can still have, I mean, what we do know about the lifespan around sex is that people are sexual beings their whole life. And that 80-year-olds still desire and want sexual connection just as much as 20-year-olds. It's just that their bodies may not function the ways that they want them to. And so it's that reminder of like finding those sexual behaviors that are gonna work well for you. And like this is the time it starts to change. Does for men too. After the age of 40 for men, because their hormones and shift things are changing too, they're going to start to have erection difficulty, and that can be really hard for them as well. And I know at a different point in time I'd love to talk more about men's sexual health, but I think it's just that reminder of like even your male partners in their 40s are starting to not be able to maintain erections or have the firmness of an erection that they once used to have, and that's hard for them too.
Totally. And yeah, you just said you potentially shouldn't be having sex if you're not talking about it, I think is the soundbite I just caught there. Huge. We need that on banners everywhere. I think that's such an important piece of information to kind of hang on to there. And it's really, it can be really empowering to have these conversations, even amongst the difficulties, even if there are, something that you're trying to work out, something that you're trying to understand throughout your kind of sexual relationships. Actually, this isn't perimenopause specific, but I think heightened even more so in the perimenopause and then through into the menopausal years, for sure. I think we might have covered everything there.
I was going to say, we're already at the end. I cannot believe it. And every time we get together, Evie, like what I've really enjoyed about us doing these together is like it just flows very easily, and we have just great conversation. But yeah, we are at the end, and if you come back to join us next week, same time, same place, we're going to talk about the menopause phase and sort of what happens after you've had your last period, going forward with that. But why don't you talk a little bit about what you have going on right now, and I can talk a little bit about what I have going on, and then we'll wrap up for today.
Totally. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Lindsay. I mean, always such a joy to talk with you. Sorry, just to go back to that. So thank you for today, and yeah, really looking forward to next week as well. I am launching my Enneagram and Menopause course. It's an online course. I'll be launching that in the spring. I don't have a firm date, but if that feels interesting and exciting and supportive to you, please do drop me your email and I will get you on the wait list and send you all the information so that you can be perusing that and getting excited for that. My monthly membership is up and live. We have our first event on Saturday this week, which is going to be all about how we can embrace the seasons alongside our menstrual cycle from the point of view of our Enneagram type. So that's a really exciting conversation that we're having in the Inner Circle, which is my monthly membership. And I've got space for one-to-one clients this quarter. So if you are looking to jump into menstrual cycle work, if you're looking for that Enneagram support, do let me know. All the information is linked in my bio, of course, but I'm always around for a chat in the DMs if you've got any specific questions. But I think that's everything that I've got going on right now. What about you, Lindsay?
Well, what I was going to say right now is I actually do, if you are in Minnesota, I actually do have a very rare therapy opening for Wednesday evenings virtually. I have had a waiting list for like the last 2 years, and I actually have some capacity to take on, like, I think, one more person. So if you are in Minneapolis and you are interested in doing therapy with me, or if you don't have to be Minneapolis, just Minnesota, because of licensing laws, contact me. I do also have a communication workshop that was pre-recorded in November that is still available. You can DM me that and I will get you the information. It comes with a nice little workbook. And then some of you may have seen that I was advertising doing an intimacy workshop. That has actually been put on hold, but I do hope to do that still. So if that is something that you are extremely interested in and hoping to do with me, it wouldn't be Enneagram related, so you wouldn't necessarily need to know the Enneagram, but how I've run these in the past is that you can ask any of your Enneagram related questions in the question and answer. But I want to make it available to anyone. And so if that is something that you're interested in, you want to know when I'm going to launch that, just send me a DM. And similarly, like I feel free to DM me and ask questions. I always enjoy having people message me and answering anything that I can. And then there's always Sexy First Fridays with Sam and I. Sam is actually on maternity leave. I'm a little sad. She's not going to be here for January or February, but we have a special guest tomorrow. God, I cannot believe it's tomorrow. Tomorrow, Rachel Larson, who is also a marriage and family therapist here in Minneapolis. She's actually coming to my office, which is kind of really fun. So it's going to be in person with both of us on here, and we're going to just talk about how having a therapist that understands the Enneagram can be really helpful in the therapy process. And then the month after, I'm having Leslie Root, who is also a therapist here in Minneapolis, who specializes in love addiction. And so she's going to come and talk a little bit more about that. And she's also an Enneagram therapist. So we are super excited. And you're going to see Evie and I next week talking about the menopause phase. Thank you so much, Evie. I really do enjoy these lives. And I hope that you have a wonderful evening where you are. It's midday here. Have a wonderful evening, and I will see you next Thursday. Take care.
Awesome.
Bye-bye.
Lindsay, bye, 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 bye.
Bye-bye.